Welcome GRD132, Typography 1 for Unit 9. I just want to go over Quiz 5. Not that you need help going over a quiz, but I just wanted to show you what I'm looking for on this quiz. And you're going to click on Quiz 5, and you're going to go down to Start the Quiz. And you're going to see some images. And I think there's 16 altogether, but for answers, since it was easier to do this, I just put a little essay box. So what you're going to do, I'll just kind of get you started here. You would look at these font pairs, and the instructions said, give some idea of the categories that they're in, plus any other details such as their weight, their width, their tracking, if that was adjusted, and also their case. For example, you might look at this, and you might look at gluten-free, and you might say, that's a slab serif. Now, that's not, but I'm just saying that. Let's say that's a slab serif, and you could put something down here like gluten-free. If you don't feel like typing a lot, you could just put GF, and you could put slab serif if you think that's a slab serif font. And then just put a comma, and then just put like orig. If you don't want to type out original, although it's not that hard to do that, you could say original, and you might want to put something like all caps, narrow, because it's kind of a narrow font, and obviously it's a sans serif. Now there's nothing else really specific about it. You don't have to put the tracking, you don't have to even put the weight unless it's like really light. You know, it is thin. Now narrow is the width because it's more condensed. The weight, it just looks like a regular weight. It could be a little lighter, but you don't really have to put the weight unless it's something very specific, such as making it very light, or if it's very extra bold, something like that. So that's all you'd have to do for that. So I just want to go through a couple of these because these are pictures I took from items around my house just because I like finding them in the wild. It's more exciting that way. Instead of just looking for images on Google or something, I like finding images and taking pictures of them and cropping them and all that kind of stuff, just finding them in their native habitat. And here's a, this is actually a cologne. Now this one, there's a sans serif and a sans serif. So what you would put here is just sans serif all caps, sans serif all caps smaller. I mean, that's all you'd really do there. And going down here, just a couple things to point out. Now, you probably know what these are just by looking at these two types of fonts here. But one thing I just want to mention, because this has a texture on, just ignore the texture. I mean, you could put it's textured, and it might even be a specific font. There is a font that has a texture like that. I can't think of the name off the top of my head. There was a Caslon Antique or something like that I remember using years ago. But you don't have to put that. You could just say what it is, even if it wasn't textured, because it's pretty, obvious what type of category font it is. And you could say all caps if you want. It's not that necessary. And moving down here, there's 3 on this one. There's a font here, and a font down there. And this one, I don't know if you'd put anything specific. You could mention that it almost looks like it could be on an angle like italic. I don't know. This one, I just want to mention, this one's kind of blurry, but you could probably guess what that is based on what's here, because remember, they wouldn't be the same thing. So whatever this category is, this would be different. And you may want to indicate that this thing, if you don't know, this is called small caps. It's where they have all capital letters, and where there would be lowercase letters, they're just smaller. So they're like, instead of lowercase, they're smaller caps. That's small caps, and these are in caps. So you could indicate that, and also indicate what kind of category that's from. This one, that's pretty self-explanatory. Although this does look a little more expanded, this looks a little more condensed of these two fonts. You could ignore the one up there, but there's obviously 2 font categories going on here. This one, now this creates some confusion sometimes, because you could look at this R and say, oh, well, that's sans serif. And then there's probably sans serif down here, but if you look at the M and you look at the Y, those kind of really distinct things about a font like that make it so that you really wouldn't use it for body copy. That's why this would be more in the decorative kind of element, and this would be kind of the plain sans serif, because typically you wouldn't put 2 sans serifs together, but this is being used in a decorative kind of way, and it has kind of these very unique letter styles here with the M, with the arches like that. So, and even the E's that are kind of rounded off. So it's a very different, it's not quite a sans serif. So I know that's confusing sometimes, because you might look at it and say, well, there's no serifs, it's sans serif. But it's kind of meant to be a decorative type font. So I just wanted to point that out. I'm not trying to trick you here with anything, but I just want to point that out as I see it. This is pretty self-explanatory. You might want to just indicate the case down here, because that makes it a little bit lighter. This one, not too much to mention here. This one, I know it's a little hard to see. This one could be a little iffy. Do your best on it. Again, ignore the texture on it. You could indicate the texture, but that doesn't mean it's a particular font. Just kind of assume it didn't have that little rough texture on it and what kind of font it would be. Now it's kind of, it could be 2, so I'll accept 2, if you have your best guess. And you could put or. You could say, well, it kind of looks like a script, or it could be italic. I don't care if you say that. It just shows that you're being observant. This one should be pretty clear what kind of font that is. Even though it's light, those big serifs on it should really indicate that. And this one here, you might indicate that it's, it's on an arch. You might indicate that the letter spacing or the tracking is spread out a little bit. This one could be a little confusing because you might look at the R and some of the lettering and say, oh, well, that's script, but it's in all caps. So if it's not necessarily being used as a script, I would say it's decorative. So this would be used in a decorative kind of way, even though maybe if you saw the upper and lower case, they might look like script lettering and it might fit in that category. But the way it's being used here, I would say it's decorative. And obviously the whole idea is to contrast with this font here. Whatever font you see that's kind of in the secondary role, notice it's always kind of, plain, and it's not meant to compete with that at all. It's meant to be lighter, kind of more uniform, thinner. It's not meant to take away from that one. This one is really meant to pop and have the emphasis, and this is meant to just kind of support it. And that's what you'll see in a lot of these. Even here, I have this one near the end because this one's a little tough. This is kind of a decorative font, but it has those little things on it, so it could be one or the other. It's actually, the font is copperplate. If you've ever heard of copperplate, sometimes it's used for law firms, financial institutions, and here it's used in kind of a decorative manner. Now there's also one here, there's a big V, which is in a particular category font, and these are in a particular category of font, and notice the letter spacing. You could just say that the tracking is expanded a little. It's expanded so it kind of spreads out and kind of takes up that space, because if they're all together, they'd be real big. So they want to keep it small, so they spread it out to keep it lighter. And you'll see that a lot. This one, obviously you should know what that is. This one you could say, oh, well, it's decorative, but it looks kind of hand done. So it could be either. You could probably go with script or decorative for that. I'd say script because it's not really the main headline. If it's being used in kind of a supporting role, I'd just say script because it looks kind of hand done. And you could also mention this one too, whatever that is over there. And this last one, I know this is a little hard to read, but you should know what this is. And even if you can't really tell what that is, you should have a good guess. What do you think they're going to use with a script font? You want to use something very plain, so what do you think that is? So you can mention that as well. So I just wanted to help you through this a little bit, just before you jump into it, and so you're not confused about anything. So that's Quiz 5 font pairs, and again, you're just going to do these little essay areas here and fill in your answers. So every essay is right below the picture that's here. And I didn't put any bigger picture. They're all 800 pixels. They should be okay. I edited them. I kind of adjusted the levels and sharpened them where I could. And I just wanted to get some images that were kind of, from the natural habitat. So good luck with that.